Hey there, this is Jeff, and I'm sitting across the street from Herbert and Gerbert's Subs and Clubs, and we're going to go through operation of the Motorola 2500 radio system. Going over the basic controls here. First one you'll want to know is the power button here. When the radio's on, you can press that briefly to turn it off, or you can press that briefly again to turn it on. It does have a sensing circuit so that when the battery comes on or your ignition comes on, it'll turn the radio on automatically, but you can override that with the power switch if you want. And you notice that when you do press that to turn it on, the radio will go through a quick little startup where all the lights will illuminate on the front of the display, and after that it should come on with the normal operations. Moving our way up, there's a home button, which also serves as an enter button for a lot of the keyboard functions. And there's a brightness display button here, so each time you press that, it cycles between 3 different levels of contrast, and then it goes to the backlighting being off altogether, and the first press brings it back on to full intensity. And that cycles through, so the more times you press it, the more it'll cycle through. Volume selector on the left, channel selector on the right. Emergency button, which is not programmed on our units at this point in time, and a 4-way menu button, which we can use for some of the advanced functions on the radio. Speaking of advanced functions on the radio, let's take a look at each one of the menu buttons. First one will be the zone button on the left. This radio is divided into several 16-channel zones. And when you press the zone button, the word zone starts to flash, and it's waiting for you to make an entry. So if you use the 4-way directional buttons here and press right or left, it'll cycle through the different zones that you can press, that you can select. And when you found the one you want, press the home button, and it'll enter and change you to that zone. Once you're away from that zone, you'll follow the same procedure to go back to zone A, which is our 16 channels and channel 1, or you can simply press and hold the home button, and it'll eventually bring you back to zone A, channel 1, which is Moorhead Fire. Second button is the scan button. If you press the scan button and you hear a long sustained tone, that means that you haven't programmed anything into your scan list, and it'll display empty list. So press that scan again to turn it off, and we'll enter the next button, which is programming for our scan. We'll know that it's in scan programming mode because a little box will show up and will be flashing on and off on the display, just like on our portables. Pressing the select button once will add that channel in as a channel list to be scanned. You'll know it's a channel that's going to be scanned because a little scan icon will appear on the display. Pressing select a second time will add a single dot behind that Z, and that single dot behind the Z means that it's going to be a secondary priority channel, which means it's going to be checking that channel frequently to see for activity, even if it's listening to another channel. And pressing it again so that the dot ends up flashing on the display behind the Z will change it to total priority mode, where this channel is checked first for activity regardless of what else is going on with the radio. So if FM ambulance is talking and somebody tries to call you on the Moorhead Fire frequency, it'll switch over to that right away. You'll use your channel selector button to go through individual channels while you're programming. And each time you press select, it will add that channel to the list. We're going to make FM ambulance our second priority channel. They got a solid dot behind there. And you're not limited to only scanning channels that are in zone A. You can use the 4-way directional switch to add channels from another bank if you'd like. So for example, I'm going to go over to zone B, and I'm going to add the Fargo Police Department's channels to the scan list, just to show you that it can be done. And there's a limit to how many channels you can put in here. You're only allowed 15 channels. in your scan list, and when you've reached the maximum number of channels you can have in, you are going to get an error tone that comes up when you try to select the next channel. And that's the error tone that you'll get saying, hey, your scan list is full. To add another channel in, you'll either have to delete one of the channels that you've added, like this one right here, but you may have already scanned up the list several channels and forgotten, gosh, what do I have in my scan list? And you can press this recall button, and each time you recall, it'll show you each one of the channels that you've programmed into your scan bank, and it'll cycle through all the different zones that you've got too, so you can select a channel maybe you don't want and delete it and add the channel that you do want to have scanned in. And a quick way to clear out your whole scan memory is to press the recall button followed by delete, and continuing that process, and it'll get rid of everything that somebody else has programmed into the scan list. Like let's say Dave Allen or Rich Eggert were in this truck last, and you just don't want to listen to all that crud, but you do want to scan a couple channels, and you're going to program your own stuff. You can do that to quickly clear things out. So I'm just going to program 2 channels for right now and hit home when I'm done programming those. And now when I press scan, it does go into scan mode, and your indicator of that will be a little scan icon on the display. While you're scanning, if you happen to have activity on a channel that's maybe putting a lot of static out and nobody's really talking on it, you can press this nuisance button right here while a channel is active, and that'll remove it from the scan bank. An example of when you may want to do this is I'll program the scan and I'll add the weather channel in as one of the scanned frequencies just so you can hear something making noise. Normally you wouldn't want to add the weather channel in because it's going to stop every time it here's activity on the weather channel, but so now for example when I press the scan button, it's going to stop pretty much right away on the weather channel. If I press this nuisance button, it will skip the weather channel this time only while the radio is on. As soon as I deactivate the scan and start it up again,
the normal low is 14.
It's right back in there. Press nuisance to get rid of it.
Precipitation
Look, there it is.
Which leaves the monthly total at 0.
So for me, I'd probably want to not have that in my scan bank. The next menu you've got is the color selector button. Pressing the color will bring you to the color change menu, and you can use your 4-way directional button to cycle between green, amber, and red. And when you found a color you want, press the select button and it'll lock that in. Pressing the 4-way menu button while the menu is displayed will show you 2 more options. One of them is the squelch setting. I wouldn't recommend changing that. Just leave that on setting number 7. It determines how sensitive a radio signal has to be before the receiver will pick that up. So I'm going to hit the home button once just to exit out of there. And the next button is the monitor button. And when you're on a frequency, you can turn off the PL tones, which is supposed to limit the radio traffic just to our units that we can hear. If for some reason you wanted to hear somebody else who doesn't have our frequency programmed in exactly right, you could press that monitor button and hear what's going on, or maybe hear skip traffic from somewhere else, but I don't know why you'd ever really want to do that, so I've turned that off. And those are the control features of the XTL 2500 radio.